When I bought a duplex without telling my parents, I accidentally uncovered a plan they thought I'd never discover. Somehow, they'd already promised my older brother and his entire family that both units would belong to them, for free. They expected me to hand over the keys with a smile, so I smiled too, and said absolutely nothing. 3 weeks later, they proudly drove over to see their new home. Instead, they found moving trucks, 2 families unpacking boxes, and giant rented signs hanging in both windows. The look on their faces was worth every second of staying quiet. I'm Emma, 31 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my parents treated my older brother Jake like he was the center of the universe. If he made a mistake, someone else was responsible. If he needed money, they found a way to help him. If I accomplished something, they congratulated me for about 5 seconds before reminding me that Jake needed support more than I did. After years of trying to earn equal treatment, I finally stopped expecting it. Instead of arguing, I focused on building the life I wanted. I worked overtime, skipped expensive vacations, drove an aging car long after my friends upgraded theirs, and saved every bonus I received. Nearly 8 years later, all those sacrifices finally paid off when I had enough money for the down payment on a duplex. It wasn't some luxurious dream home. It was simply a smart investment. My plan was to live in one unit and rent out the other until the mortgage became manageable. The best part was that I hadn't told anyone in my family yet. I wasn't trying to hide it forever. I just wanted everything finalized before anyone had the chance to turn my achievement into their opportunity. That decision turned out to be the smartest one I'd ever made. About a week before closing, I ran into one of my parents' longtime neighbors while shopping for groceries. She smiled warmly and asked, "So, when does Jake move into your new duplex?" I stared at her, completely confused. "I'm sorry, what?" She looked surprised by my reaction. "Your parents have been telling everyone that you bought a duplex so Jake, his wife, and the kids could finally have enough room. They said you're giving them both units." "Both units? For free?" I laughed because I genuinely thought she was joking, but the expression on her face told me she wasn't. My parents had apparently been sharing this story with relatives, neighbors, and family friends as if the decision had already been made. I didn't call them, I didn't argue. I simply stayed quiet and listened. Over the next few days, more people unknowingly confirmed the story. My brother's wife had already started talking about where she'd put the furniture. My parents discussed babysitting the grandchildren every afternoon since they'd be living so close. Jake had apparently been telling people this duplex was finally giving him the fresh start he deserved. Not one person had asked me. That was the moment I decided they were going to learn an expensive lesson. Closing day arrived, and I signed every document with a smile. As soon as I received the keys, I replaced every lock and hired a property manager. Instead of moving in myself, I listed both units for rent. Within 10 days, 2 wonderful families signed 1-year leases, paid their deposits, and moved in. I rented a smaller apartment closer to my office, and thanks to the rental income, the duplex practically paid for itself every month. Then I waited. 3 weeks later, my phone suddenly filled with missed calls from my mother, father, and brother. I ignored every one of them until Jake finally sent a text. "Where are you? We're outside. The keys don't work." A minute later, another message arrived. "Who are these people moving into our house?" I smiled before replying with just 3 words. "Those are my tenants." The phone rang immediately. I answered, and before I could even say hello, my father shouted, "What have you done?" "I rented out my duplex," I replied calmly. "You rented Jake's house?" "No," I corrected him. "I rented my property." There was complete silence before my mother spoke. "But we promised it to him." "I know," I said. "The problem is that you promised something you didn't own." Jake grabbed the phone next. "So you're choosing strangers over your own family?" "No," I answered. "I'm honoring legal lease agreements instead of imaginary promises that I never made." He accused me of being selfish, jealous, and heartless. I simply reminded him that apartments were available all over town if he wanted to rent one. Then I wished him luck and ended the call. The next evening, all 3 of them showed up outside my apartment. My mother cried, my father lectured me about family responsibility, and Jake complained non-stop about how expensive rent had become. Then Dad said something that genuinely shocked me. "You can just evict those families." I looked at him in disbelief. "You expect me to illegally throw innocent people out of their homes because you volunteered my property without asking me." For the first time in years, he had absolutely nothing to say. Word eventually spread through the family. At first, several relatives criticized me, believing my parents' version of the story. But once they learned I'd never promised anyone the duplex, the conversations became awkward. Every discussion ended with the same simple question. If Emma never agreed to this, why did you promise Jake the house? No one had an answer. A few months later, Jake rented a smaller apartment and finally started paying his own bills like everyone else. My parents quietly stopped mentioning the duplex because every conversation reminded them of the same mistake. They had treated my hard work as if it belonged to someone else. Today, both of my tenants are fantastic. They pay their rent on time, take care of the property, and every month they help build the future I spent years working toward. Ironically, the duplex became more than just an investment. It taught my family a lesson they should have learned long ago. Being generous with your own time, money, or property is admirable. Volunteering someone else's hard-earned success isn't generosity, it's entitlement. A few months ago, my mother casually asked whether I planned to buy another investment property someday. I smiled and said, maybe. She smiled back and replied, well, this time you should tell us first. I looked her straight in the eye before answering, that's exactly why I won't. She didn't laugh. I did. Because after everything that happened, I'd finally learned that the less my family knew about my finances, the more peaceful my life became. And honestly, that peace turned out to be the best investment I ever made.